"Your son wants to kill you," the little street kid blurted out in the hospital to the bedridden millionaire. Then, seconds later, his young son walks in with a syringe and does something shocking. Please comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The impact sounded like thunder ripping through the busy afternoon in the chaotic metropolis. The luxury car spun out of control before slamming into a lamppost, the metal twisting as glass scattered across the sidewalk like fake diamonds. The 4-year-old street kid, so skinny she looked barely 2, watched everything from her usual spot near the dumpster, where she usually scavenged for scraps. Her little heart raced when she saw the driver of the silver vehicle, that handsome, impeccably dressed man, like a movie star, who had once given her a kind smile when she tried to wipe his windshield at a stoplight. People began to crowd around, cell phones raised, capturing the disaster while sirens wailed in the distance. The little girl approached with tiny steps, her bare feet avoiding the shards of glass scattered across the hot asphalt. Something caught her eye under the wrecked car. A dark liquid was leaking, forming a puddle that didn't seem like just oil. She crouched down, her big eyes examining what the hurried adults didn't notice. There, on the brakes exposed by the collision, were cuts too clean to be accidental, marks that her life on the streets had taught her to recognize as intentional. The man was pulled from the vehicle by paramedics working quickly, his pale face covered in blood as he was placed on a stretcher. The girl followed the ambulance, running as fast as her skinny legs would carry her, losing sight of it 3 blocks later. But she had memorized the name on the side of the emergency vehicle, City General Hospital, that enormous building where sometimes she could sleep on the benches in the entrance before being kicked out. That night, huddled in a damp alley that she called home, the little girl couldn't forget that smile. Among all the faces that ignored her daily, that rich man had looked at her as if she were a real person, not just another piece of trash in the urban landscape. Something inside her chest tightened when she thought of him hurt, maybe dying, while whoever had cut his brakes walked free. 3 days later, she managed to sneak into the hospital, hidden in a cleaning cart that a distracted employee had left in the hallway. Her small body squeezed into impossible spaces, a skill developed in years of surviving alone. She found his room on the 3rd floor after overhearing nurses talking about the wealthy businessman who had arrived near death. He was connected to various tubes and machines that beeped constantly, his face still marked by purple bruises and cuts in the process of healing. The girl hid under the hospital bed when she heard footsteps approaching. A stern-faced woman entered, accompanied by a little boy the same age as her. The nanny, as the nurses called her, had hard eyes that scanned the room with excessive attention before allowing the boy to approach the unconscious father. "Say hello to Daddy," the woman ordered in a mechanical tone, without any warmth. The boy hesitated, his small fingers clutching a colorful lunchbox against his chest. "Is he going to wake up soon?" "It depends on many things," the nanny replied, removing something from the lunchbox, a plastic container with a clear liquid. "I brought his special juice, the one the private doctor recommended to help him recover." Under the bed, the girl watched through the gap between the mattress and the floor. Something about the scene bothered her deeply, a bad feeling that she couldn't name but that her gut recognized as danger. The nanny poured part of the liquid into a glass that was already on the table beside the bed, mixing it with water before connecting it to the patient's feeding tube. During the following weeks, the little girl established a risky routine. She arrived at the hospital before dawn, hid in cleaning closets and empty rooms, memorized shift change times. She learned that the nanny visited every day at 3 in the afternoon, always with that lunchbox, always with the silent boy, who seemed to carry an immense weight on his small shoulders. The rich man's condition fluctuated in strange ways. Some days he seemed to improve, even opening his eyes briefly. But always, after the nanny's visits, his condition worsened drastically, causing the doctors to rush around confused with their machines and medicines. The girl began to rummage through the hospital trash during the early morning hours, when only sleepy security guards patrolled the corridors. That's how she found the syringes discarded in a strange way, wrapped in toilet paper and thrown into ordinary bags instead of the appropriate medical waste bins. Her survival instinct made her keep one of them in her only possession, a dirty piece of cloth that served as a blanket. One afternoon, hidden behind a meal cart, she overheard a conversation that froze her blood. The nanny was speaking on the phone in a low voice in the empty corridor near the emergency stairs. "You need to be patient. These things take time. If it's too fast, they'll get suspicious." A pause. The boy is doing his part without even knowing it. "Poor kid thinks he's helping his father recover faster." Bitter laughter. 3 years planning this. I'm not going to ruin everything by rushing now." The little girl didn't understand all the words, but the icy tone said it all. That woman was hurting the man on purpose, and somehow she was using his son to do it. When the nanny walked away, the girl noticed something that had fallen from her pocket, a crumpled piece of paper with a handwritten list of plants. Strange names that she couldn't read, but that she kept along with the syringe, feeling that they were important. The months dragged on. The girl witnessed the man slowly wasting away, losing that sparkle that made his smile so striking that day at the stoplight. She tried to alert a nurse, pulling on her sleeve and pointing at the nanny, but was pushed away like an inconvenient insect. "Get out of here, you dirty kid! How did you get in here?" "Security!" She had to flee through the ventilation ducts, her heart beating erratically as tears of frustration burned her eyes. No one listened to her. To the world, she was invisible, useful only when she bothered enough to be removed. But the girl didn't give up. She continued watching, collecting evidence that she didn't know how to use, because something inside her, bigger than the fear and constant hunger, said that that man needed help. And maybe, just maybe, she was the only person in the whole world who could save him. The clock struck 3 in the afternoon when the nanny entered the room again, bringing the little boy and that lunchbox. This time, the little street kid noticed that the boy was crying softly, his hands trembling as he held the container. And for the first time, she realized something crucial. The boy also knew that something was terribly wrong. The discovery came on a suffocating Tuesday afternoon, when the girl followed the nanny to a secret meeting in the hospital basement. Hidden behind stacks of medical supplies, she watched the woman hand a thick envelope to a man in a white coat who was sweating profusely even in the air-conditioned environment. The private doctor trembled as he accepted the money, his eyes constantly darting to the sides like a cornered animal. "You know what happens if someone discovers those documents I have stashed away?" The nanny's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "Your career would end in seconds. That mistake 5 years ago that caused permanent damage to that patient. Imagine if her family knew you were drunk during the surgery." The doctor closed his eyes, defeated. "Please, I've already done everything you asked. The false notes in the file, the altered reports. When is this going to end?" "When I decide it's over." The nanny approached, her tone dropping to a venomous whisper. "Continue administering the doses I prepare. Tell the other doctors it's a special nutritional supplement. In a few more months, it will look like natural organ failure, and you'll be free. Simple as that." The girl felt something icy run down her spine. That woman was really trying to kill the rich man, and she had someone helping because of secrets from the past. When both walked away, she crawled to where they had been and found a small vial that had rolled under a shelf. The liquid inside was slightly greenish and smelled of something bitter that made her eyes sting. In the following days, the little girl intensified her observations. She discovered that the nanny always arrived 2 hours before the official visits, using a side entrance to the hospital where she kept a lunchbox in a locked locker in the women's changing room. One afternoon, when the area was deserted, the girl used a paperclip found in the trash to pick the lock. a technique learned from watching other homeless people. Inside were vials identical to the one she had found, along with carefully pressed dried leaves of plants. She took one of the leaves and kept it in her cloth. She needed to show it to someone, but who would believe a child who could barely speak properly? Malnutrition and lack of formal education made her words come out truncated, confused. Adults always treated her as if she were mentally retarded, instead of just neglected. It was then that she started following the nanny outside the hospital as well. She found out where she lived, an impressive mansion surrounded by huge gardens. The little girl spent entire nights watching through the iron gates, seeing the woman personally tend to specific flower beds in the yard, always wearing thick gloves and a mask, while pruning and processing certain plants with purple flowers and shiny leaves. The puzzle began to form in the girl's simple but sharp mind. The plants in the garden turned into that green liquid. The liquid went into the vials. The vials went to the hospital. And the rich man got worse and worse. For 4 months she persisted, each day more desperate to see the patient wasting away. His face lost color, his body thinned, even connected to feeding tubes. His breathing became weaker. The doctors ran from one side to the other with confused expressions, doing tests that did not explain the progressive deterioration. The girl tried again to alert people. She pulled on the sleeve of a social worker who was visiting other patients, pointing at the nanny and making frantic gestures. She hurts him! Plant! Poison! The social worker knelt down, but her smile was condescending. Honey, you shouldn't be here. Are you hungry? Let's find a shelter for you. No, listen! The little girl almost screamed, tears of frustration running down her face. Man die, she kills. Those are fantasies, child. You're confused. The woman was already losing interest, turning her attention to the clipboard. Can security escort this girl to the exit? For the second time she was expelled, and this time she cried tears that she hadn't shed in years. She cried for her own impotence, for being too small, too dirty, too invisible to matter. She cried because she knew the truth, but couldn't get anyone to listen. That night something changed. The girl decided that if the adults didn't listen to words, she needed evidence that they couldn't ignore. She returned to the hospital with renewed determination, rummaged through the trash with method, stole an old broken recorder that a visitor had discarded, and miraculously managed to make it partially work after playing with the wires. She started recording everything. The nanny's whispered conversations on the phone, the patient's moans of pain after each visit, the sound of the private doctor crying alone in the bathroom, muttering apologies to the air. They were fragmented pieces, but they were real evidence. It was during one of these recordings that she heard something that stopped her heart. Hidden in the janitor's closet of the hallway, the recorder hidden in her lap captured the nanny talking to the 4-year-old boy. Remember what Grandma Crusoe taught you? Her voice was too sweet, fake as spoiled honey. Daddy needs these special medicines to wake up. You're a good boy helping him like that. But he gets worse every time, the boy's voice trembled. I have nightmares that I'm hurting him. Those are just silly dreams. You're saving your dad, understand? Without these medicines, he will never wake up completely. The doctor said so. Lie after lie dripped from that mouth. You want Daddy to get well, don't you? I want... The boy sobbed softly. Then be strong. Just a few more months, and he will be completely recovered. Do you trust me? Heavy silence. Then, almost imperceptible, I trust. The girl pressed the recorder against her thin chest. That woman was using the child, manipulating his love for his father to turn him into a weapon. The little boy believed he was helping, when in reality he was participating in something terrible without understanding. She needed to act fast. In recent days, the rich man's condition had deteriorated dramatically. His eyelids barely opened, his breathing was aided by machines, and the doctors spoke in somber terms about multiple organ failure without an identifiable cause. The little girl made a risky decision. That morning, when the hospital slept in silence, interrupted only by beeping monitors, she left her hiding place and walked to his room. For the first time in months, she approached the bed without hiding. The man was as pale as the moon, tubes coming out of his nose and arms. But something made his eyes open, maybe a sound, maybe just instinct. He saw her there, a tiny and dirty girl holding a torn bag against her chest, tears running down her dirty face. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from so much silence. "Wake up. She kills you. I have proof." His eyes focused with difficulty. There was confusion there, but also something else, recognition. He remembered her. That child from the stoplight who had tried to clean his glass. His lips moved, forming words that barely came out. "Help!" The girl nodded frantically. "Yes, I help. But you need to call someone who believes in you." He tried to reach the call button, but his fingers barely responded. The little girl helped him, pressing the button repeatedly, but when the nurse arrived, she had already disappeared under the bed, her heart beating so loudly that she was sure everyone would hear it. "Mr. Valverde is awake," the nurse shouted into the hallway. "Call the head doctor, he's trying to talk." Frantic movement took over the room. Doctors rushed in, checking vital signs, asking questions. And in the middle of the chaos, the rich man whispered something that would change everything. "Director, call, hospital director, danger, kid knows." The words were disjointed, but there was urgency in them. And for the first time in months of silent suffering, someone would finally pay attention to what a 4-year-old street kid had to say. The hospital director arrived in the room at 4 in the morning, still wearing surgical scrubs after spending 12 hours in a complex operation. His face showed deep fatigue, but the urgency of the call kept him alert. He and the businessman had been college buddies decades ago, sharing not only classes, but also dreams of building solid careers. Seeing his friend in that devastated state broke his heart. "What happened? I was told you woke up asking for me specifically." The director approached the bed, checking the monitors with experienced eyes. The rich man struggled to form words, each syllable a monumental effort. "Kid, she knows danger." "What kid?" The director frowned, confused. "Your son is at home with the nanny." "No, another little girl. As proof." It was then that the little girl slowly crawled out from under the bed, her movements cautious like those of a wild animal ready to flee. The director took a step back, surprised by the sudden appearance of that dirty, ragged child in the hospital room during the early morning hours. "How did you get in here?" His voice had authority, but the girl didn't back down. Instead, she extended the torn bag with trembling hands, her big eyes fixed on the man with desperate intensity. Inside was the broken recorder, the syringes wrapped in cloth, the vial of greenish liquid, the dried leaves of plants, and the crumpled paper with the list. A strange set of objects that didn't make immediate sense, but something in the patient's expression made the director begin to examine each item with growing attention. He pressed play on the recorder. The nanny's voice echoed in the silent room, talking about compromising documents, about the private doctor, about months of planning. The director paled progressively, his hands gripping the device with growing force. "This can't be real," he muttered, but his tone carried the horror of someone who recognized the truth. You're saying that—" "Poison," the little girl managed to articulate, pointing to the vial. "Her garden. Plant. He gets sick." The director looked at his friend in the bed, seeing the confirmation in his exhausted eyes. Quick decisions needed to be made. He picked up the internal phone and called security, requesting that they locate the private doctor immediately and that no one enter or leave the hospital without authorization. Then he called the police, his voice firm despite the trembling in his hands. "Stay here," he said to the girl, who had retreated to the farthest corner of the room. "You won't be hurt. I need you to be brave for a little longer." 40 minutes passed in growing tension. The private doctor was found in the parking lot, getting into his car with a suitcase on the back seat. When the security guards approached him, he completely collapsed, falling to his knees on the cold asphalt and crying uncontrollably. They took him to the administrative office where the director was waiting for him. The man was destroyed, his lab coat rumpled and stained with sweat, his eyes red from sleepless nights. Before any questions were asked, the words began to pour from his mouth like a desperate confession. "I didn't want to. She forced me. She has proof of a mistake I made years ago, a terrible mistake that ruined the life of a patient. I was going through a difficult divorce. I was drinking too much. I operated when I shouldn't have." Sobs interrupted his sentences. "She found out everything. I don't know how. She said she would go to the press, to the medical board, that I would lose everything. My license, my reputation, my freedom." "So you agreed to poison a patient?" The director's voice was pure ice. "She said it would be quick, that it would look like a natural complication of the accident, but it was months seeing him suffer." The doctor covered his face with his hands. "I tried to stop, but she forged documents with my signature, created a paper trail that incriminates me as if I were an accomplice from the beginning. If I denounced her, I would go to jail anyway. Tell me everything, every detail." The complete story emerged in painful fragments. The nanny had started working for the family 3 years ago, shortly after the businessman's wife began to show strange symptoms that doctors attributed to an autoimmune disease. In fact, she was also being poisoned slowly for 2 whole years. The same plants, the same techniques, small doses that weakened the immune system until her body simply gave up fighting. She planned this since she was hired. The director could barely process the magnitude of the evil. Since before, she had a connection with the family, something from the past. His brother, who passed away years ago. She was his secret lover. She was pregnant when he died, lost the baby because of the trauma. She blames the businessman for the tragedy, says he stole her chance at happiness. The doctor swallowed hard. She developed a sick obsession to destroy the whole family. She studied poisonous plants, got a job with false references, gained everyone's trust. The door opened and police officers entered, accompanied by investigators. The doctor repeated everything, his voice getting weaker with each revelation. He mentioned the diaries that the nanny kept, detailed records of years of planning, studies on homemade toxicology using local flora. "And the boy?" asked one of the investigators. "The businessman's son. What is his role in this?" "She manipulates him since he was a baby. She tells distorted stories, makes him believe that he is helping his father. The child has no idea what he is really doing. He carries the poisons thinking they are special medicines." The doctor shook his head. "It's monstrous. She turned that boy into an instrument of murder without him understanding." Teams were dispatched immediately to the mansion. The nanny was found in the garden, even though it was dawn, wearing thick gloves while processing more leaves. She had suitcases packed in her room, tickets purchased for another region of the country. Plans to disappear with the little boy as soon as the businessman finally passed away. She didn't resist the arrest, but her face remained cold as marble while she was handcuffed. "He deserved every drop of suffering. They stole everything from me. My love, my son, my life. You murdered an innocent woman and used a child as a weapon," said the policewoman who was leading her away. "There is no justification for what you did." Back at the hospital, the boy was brought by social workers, confused and scared. He found his father awake for the first time in months, connected to machines but conscious. The little street kid watched from afar, leaning against the wall of the hallway, still holding her dirty cloth. "Daddy." The boy's voice was so small, so broken. I helped you?" The businessman extended his trembling hand, tears running down his injured face. "You didn't know, son. It wasn't your fault. But she said I was saving you. I know, and you're just a child. None of this is your fault. He pulled the boy into an awkward hug, restricted by the tubes and bandages. "We'll get through this together." The little street kid began to walk away slowly, her job finished. She had saved the rich man, exposed the truth. Now she needed to return to the streets, to her damp and cold alley, to the life she always knew. "Wait." The businessman's voice stopped her. You saved my life. Saved my son from carrying impossible guilt for the rest of his life. How can I thank you?" She didn't answer. She didn't know how. She just looked at him with those eyes too big for her small face, expecting to be dismissed as she always was. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Silence. She didn't have a name that anyone used. She was just girl, or get out of here, or nothing. "Don't know or don't want to say?" She shrugged, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. The director touched his friend's shoulder. "She needs urgent medical care, severe malnutrition, probable anemia, needs vaccines." "Then provide everything." The businessman didn't take his eyes off the little girl. "And then we need to talk about where she's going to stay." For the first time in her short and brutal life, the little street kid felt something strange igniting in her chest. It felt warm. It felt fragile. It felt dangerous to believe. It felt like hope. The next 3 months transformed the lives of everyone involved in ways that no one could have predicted. The girl received medical care for the first time, treating chronic malnutrition that had stunted her growth, severe anemia that explained her constant fatigue, and receiving all the delayed vaccines. Social workers tried to locate her family, but records only indicated abandonment in front of a shelter when she was months old, followed by escape to the streets at 3 years old, when the precarious conditions became unbearable. The businessman struggled against extensive physical damage from prolonged poisoning. His heart presented worrying arrhythmias. His liver needed constant monitoring, and daily physical therapy helped him relearn basic movements that the poison had compromised. But the deepest damage was emotional. The betrayal of someone he had trusted to care for his son in his most vulnerable years left invisible scars that burned more than any physical wound. The little boy faced terrible nightmares every night. He woke up screaming, sweating cold, remembering the times he had carried that lunchbox without knowing that he was participating in something monstrous. Specialized psychologists worked with him daily, but progress was slow and painful. He refused to eat on certain days, had panic attacks when he saw white coats, and repeatedly asked if his father really forgave him. "There's nothing to forgive," the businessman repeated every time, holding his son's small hands. "You were manipulated. She took advantage of your love for me and turned it into a weapon. The guilt was never yours." But words don't always heal such deep wounds. The boy carried an impossible weight for 5-year-old shoulders, and only time would reveal if he could completely overcome the trauma. During this period, the girl watched everything from afar. She had been temporarily installed in a hospital room while receiving treatment, but maintained emotional distance from everyone except the businessman. There was something in the connection between them that transcended logic. She had saved him. He saw her as a real person for the first time in her life. Among victims of cruel circumstances, they recognized in each other a strength that few understood. It was during a family therapy session in the hospital room that the truth about the deceased wife fully emerged. The boy finally verbalized fragmented memories that the psychologists helped to organize. "I remember her getting weak," he said in a trembling voice. "The nanny made special teas that Mommy drank every day. Then Mommy slept a lot and got pale." Tears ran down his face. "I thought the teas were good." The nanny said so. The businessman felt pain more acute than any poisoning. His wife had suffered for 2 years while that woman administered slow death under the guise of care. And he, too, absorbed by work and the company's problems, hadn't noticed the signs until it was too late. "I failed her," he confessed to the therapists, his voice breaking. "I was building a fortune through risky investments in the stock market, expanding capital in applications that required constant attention. I was accumulating wealth thinking I was guaranteeing a secure future for my family, but I lost the present. I lost time with her. And when I finally noticed that something was wrong, it was too late. The guilt he carried was multifaceted, for the wife he didn't protect, for the son he left vulnerable to manipulation, for the years wasted prioritizing assets over presence. The car accident that almost killed him hadn't been random, but he realized now that he had been walking towards the tragedy long before the brakes were cut. The little street kid, sitting in a chair near the window during these sessions, absorbed everything in silence. She was learning that rich families also suffered, that money didn't buy protection against betrayal or pain. She saw the man she had admired for a kind smile, revealing deep vulnerability, and something inside her transformed. The social workers informed him that they wanted to place her in a municipal institution that cared for abandoned children. The businessman, still in the hospital bed, made an unexpected proposal that shocked everyone present. "I would like to be her temporary guardian." Heavy silence filled the room. The social worker who hadn't believed her months ago was the first to protest. "Sir, with all due respect, you are still recovering from severe poisoning. Your son needs intensive therapy, and you are a single man with no experience caring for traumatized street children. Precisely for that reason, I understand what she needs." He looked at the girl, who was staring at him with an indecipherable expression. Stability, security, someone who sees her as a real human being. "She saved my life, risking her own. I have a responsibility to her now." "This is not a matter of debt or gratitude," argued the assistant, guilt coloring her words. "It's about the best interest of the child. And you think a crowded institution where she has already suffered before is better? She ran away from there for a reason. At 3 years old, she preferred the streets to that place." His voice carried a determination that the disease had not been able to destroy. "I will hire lawyers, present detailed plans, do everything necessary legally, but I will not abandon her." Assessment sessions were conducted for weeks. Psychologists interviewed everyone involved, analyzed the family dynamics, questioned whether the still recovering man was emotionally and physically fit to take on additional responsibility. The process left the little girl's fate in a painful limbo where she oscillated between fragile hope and preparation for more rejection. During this time, something unexpected happened. The boy and the girl began to develop their own connection. Initially cautious of each other, they slowly discovered that they shared a unique understanding of pain and trauma. He taught her words she didn't know, showing her illustrated books that fascinated her. She taught him resilience, showing him that it was possible to survive even when everything seemed lost. "Aren't you mad at me?" he asked one afternoon while they were drawing together, "for me having done those things to my dad?" She shook her head vigorously. "You didn't know. Kid doesn't know those bad things. Bad adult does." The simple wisdom of someone who had survived the worst of humanity brought comfort that therapists couldn't provide. For the first time in months, the boy smiled genuinely. The businessman watched these interactions from the hallway when he could get out of bed with the help of a walker. He saw two small beings who had gone through different horrors, finding healing in each other. He saw the possibility of a family rebuilt not by blood, but by choice and genuine love. When he was finally discharged from the hospital after 3 months, the decision on guardianship was still pending. He returned to the mansion that seemed haunted by memories of betrayal. The boy had difficulty readjusting, avoiding the garden where the nanny had cultivated her deadly plants, having nightmares about the hallways she had roamed. It was the little girl, temporarily installed in a guest room while awaiting a court decision, who suggested a radical change. She pointed to the poisonous flower beds and then made a gesture of tearing everything out. Bad plant goes away. Good plant comes in. New place starts. The simplicity of the idea was perfect. During an entire week, they hired gardeners to remove all the plants that the nanny had cultivated, replacing them with colorful flowers and fruit trees. The boy helped plant rose bushes, finding catharsis in destroying the poison and creating beauty. The girl planted sunflower seeds, flowers she had always seen in parks but had never been able to call her own. When the first one sprouted days later, she sat beside it, watching with intense concentration, as if protecting a precious treasure. The businessman watched everything from a wheelchair that he still needed to use for long distances. His wealth remained intact. The investments in stocks continued to generate profits. His financial investments guaranteed material security for generations. But he realized now that he had accumulated a fortune while impoverishing himself in more important aspects. Money hadn't saved his wife, hadn't protected his son, hadn't prevented him from almost dying. It was a child without any wealth, living on the streets with nothing but survival instinct and inexplicable compassion, who had really saved him. A month later, the judge responsible for the case issued a decision. The psychological evaluations indicated that, surprisingly, the girl's presence was helping in the boy's recovery process. He ate better when she was present, had fewer nightmares, showed accelerated progress in therapy. The businessman had demonstrated genuine commitment, hiring a qualified support team and presenting a detailed care plan. Temporary guardianship was granted, with a reassessment scheduled for 6 months later. When the news arrived, the businessman gathered both children in the renovated living room of the mansion. The little girl was holding her dirty cloth, the only possession she refused to abandon, even after getting new clothes and toys. "This means you're going to live here with us for now," he explained gently. "If you want to, of course." She looked around, at the huge house, at the boy who was smiling eagerly, at the man who saw her as a real person. Then she looked at the cloth in her hands, a symbol of everything she had survived. Slowly, carefully, she folded the fabric and placed it in her pocket. She wasn't going to throw it away. It was part of her story, but she didn't need to cling to it with despair anymore either. "Stay," she said simply, the first word she had chosen with complete freedom in her entire life. The following months were of adjustments and discoveries. The girls started remedial classes with a patient private tutor who taught not only letters and numbers, but also that learning could be joyful. Her natural intelligence blossomed with proper opportunity, surprising everyone with the speed of her progress. The boy continued therapy, but now with a sister by choice by his side, both processing traumas together. He taught her about the mother he lost, keeping alive the memory of the woman the nanny had stolen. She taught him about resilience, about finding beauty even in dark alleys. The businessman relearned to be a present father. He drastically reduced working hours, delegated responsibilities, prioritized family dinners over business meetings. His physical scars from the poisoning would remain forever. His heart would never be completely healthy. His liver required constant monitoring. But these marks served as daily reminders that he had almost lost everything chasing material wealth. 6 months later, the reassessment confirmed what everyone already knew. Guardianship became permanent, and a simple but emotionally charged ceremony formalized what hearts had already decided. The man who had accumulated a fortune through risky investments now held 2 children by the hands. A son almost lost to cruel manipulation, and a girl gained through improbable tragedy. The little girl, now 5 years old, but still smaller than other children her age due to years of malnutrition, finally learned to call that mansion home. Her sunflower grew strong and tall in the renovated garden, a perfect symbol of how beauty could emerge from soil once poisoned. The businessman established a discreet foundation to help street children, providing not only food, but education and dignified care. Each child helped honor the little girl who had saved everything when no one else saw the danger, who proved that a person's value wasn't measured by wealth or appearance, but by the courage to act when it mattered. And as the sun set over the garden, filled with new flowers and promises of better tomorrows, 3 survivors of cruel circumstances found healing together, proving that true family was built not by blood or money, but by choice, love, and the determination to transform pain into hope. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring everyday videos that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.